It is believed that as early as 800 BC during ancient Greek time, retail trade was already well established, with transactions being carried out in the open markets that had designated days and places where consumers could access products and services. During this time, the most common means of transaction was barter trade, where people exchanged items for another set of items. As time went on, barter trade was replaced by currencies. Retail stores in the past provided general services by either selling directly to the final consumer through a company-owned store or by commissioning an agent who delivered the manufacturer's goods to shopkeepers who would in turn resell them. In a move to come up with a better retailing option, there came the departmental stores that quickly gripped the retailing industry because they offered discounts and hence registered more sales with new consumers. As retail shops became popular, consumers experienced more interactions with products before purchase. By around the late 18th century, shopping markets and arcades emerged and started to attract the middle class. From there came the concept of window shopping, which emerged from the long glass used in exterior windows of stores, which would propel the middle class to see the shop items from outside without necessarily entering the shop.
Kampala is a hub of retail business. As you can see, there is business everywhere. The Innovation Village carried out a survey with retailers to find out how they performed during the lockdown. Here are some of the findings. The emerging beauty and cosmetics industry was greatly affected by the closure of malls, airports and borders because they greatly depend on imports.
I am Marion. I deal in women's clothes mostly. Business before COVID was a bit okay because we were making some sales, but then business after COVID was really hard because we had to pay rent and we were closed.
So the onset of COVID-19 has been one, the greatest opportunity, but also on the flip side, also the greatest challenge for businesses. Of course, the demand for healthcare services immediately went up during the COVID-19 period. Specifically because our kind of service delivery model relied on a virtual experience. And the convenience of that in itself meant that our demand immediately shot up the moment mobility for individuals and families was restricted and people couldn't go to their neighborhood clinic or their big hospital like they normally used to.
Like in lockdown, we are not delivering because the goods were locked inside our shops.
Like safe borders who were transporting people did not have any more work.
The means of transport were a bit difficult, the costs were high.
There was no movement of goods. The consistent testing at the borders created a nightmare from a point of view that it takes a much longer time to bring goods into the country. Even when the goods have come in, a lot of the malls were closed for an extended period. So there was an overall shift in demand cycle within the FMCG space.
The businesses that relied on daily walk-ins had limited access to customers, as during the lockdown, shops were closed.
We saw businesses restructuring on the employment side because they were not earning, they were not getting money in. Many of them prefer not to go to the shopping malls, to arcades, because of the risks that are faced. So before the customer used to go to the retailer, now the retailer has to go to the customer.
People have started walking instead of paying rent. If they have a vehicle, they deliver directly instead of you coming to the shop.
Crisis is what drives change more than opportunity does. There are only two ways people really change, and that is one, when there's an opportunity for them to do so for their own betterment, but then that's only just a small fraction of early adopters and so on. But I think the majority will only changes when they're in a moment of crisis. And that's when you really need to show them the magic of whatever it is that you're delivering in your unique value proposition.
Retailers close to consumers' homes fared well during lockdown because of transport restrictions that did not enable consumers to access large retailers.
Those businesses kept on working because for them they were not affected by the transport costs.
Large retailers saw a drop in sales compared to their small retailing counterparts.
At the end of the day, we only exist because the customer exists. No customer, no bank. That's just how it is. So if the majority of businesses have been impacted, we had to go through a massive restructure of our loans. So for the borrowed customers, first of all, How do we restructure your facilities to ensure that there is no obligation to pay now? Your loan schedules have been shifted to a time when you can actually pay.
So I think moving forward, because people are not going to be more of demanding quality, because now they can shop, they can have a variety of shopping online. They won't demand more of a variety.
And so we're going to start seeing like a complete shift to like some of these big brands going direct to the consumer, because guess what, like they've not created a direct relationship with the consumer, and that means that they rely on third-party providers, i.e. retail shop, who even in the lockdown could not sell to their consumers to be able to sell. And when that chain was kind of blocked, they were looking around for how do we actually go direct to the consumer.
COVID-19 equally presented the opportunity for retailers to interact with their customers on social media platforms.
Retailers in Uganda have taken a step in the right direction by joining e-commerce platforms.
Some of my customers were using online selling, so I would get something and we sell online.
During this period, I've learned not only to base on those clients that only come at the shop, but I've learned to do online business.
The future of retail is characterized by diversification of the supply chain, digital transformation, and business development in new opportunity spaces such as warehousing, online business, the gig economy, import substitution, and business development support.
So we've had probably more things off the conveyor belt over the last 6 months than we did over the last few years. And that's probably the silver lining from the COVID pandemic, that it fast-tracked the disruptive digital innovative solutions that impact customers' lives, that move cash out of the hands and into a more digital environment.
The retailer is more or less, they need to understand that the service they offer it has to be protected by the regulation. So it is more of the customer who is protected. The retailer on their protection will come in on competition laws, because if you have competition on antitrust laws, the retailer is in a way protected. So either way, the government has worked on the retailer, now has to work on the customer as well to be protected.
In Uganda, we rely so much on imports from China. However, due to the lockdown, lack of access to these markets caused economic strain and disruption.
What was interesting during this COVID-19 pandemic is air travel and cargo travel got heavily disrupted. And a lot of the pharmaceutical supplies that we have in this country are imported. What that means is that somebody has to source these items from suppliers across the entire world and make sure that they can build those relationships to bring them in affordably. So it affected the pricing of certain medicines. Those definitely went up. It also affected the availability of certain medicines. And that's always a very difficult place to be if you're particularly used to taking one particular regimen of medicines.
The people who could walk to your shop were few. And then, of course, there's the paranoia of the misinformation that was happening at the beginning of the pandemic, where people were fearing to just even walk next to somebody. Oh, I'm going to catch COVID just walking next to somebody. So that entire paranoia created a situation where there was very little activity happening on the retail front.
As Safe Border, some of the things that we've done to bridge this gap in terms of like customers and spending behaviors, we can kind of aggregate this data and we can come back to these vendors and tell them, hey, you need to maybe think about restocking more of this, because customers in the same vicinity are opting to go to another location because you don't have specific items.
One of the things any business needs to know is that tax is here to stay. So with that as a hindsight, you must make sure that the best way of tax avoidance, which everyone likes to ask, tax avoidance, tax evasion, how do I tax avoid? The best way of tax avoidance is to comply.
So traditional retail has always held as a strategic advantage, a competitive strategic advantage, being able to have multiple locations, because the way people access services was physical. And seeing that people are now becoming more technologically savvy and comfortable with using technology to do retail, the need for those physical stores is starting to dwindle.
So how we build trust between retailers and customers is, first we have like an escrow service. So for every shop that we've set up, we make sure it is going to accept cashless payment. So as safe border, you kind of commit the money, whether the customer has paid or not. And the reason why we do that is like if the customer returns the item, we can deal with the retailer, and the retailer will know that we are going to take back our money, and we have like contracts in place for that.
I think it's important for retailers to be more reliable. Whether you're shipping locally or internationally, send what you advertise.
At the beginning of the pandemic, we had a lot of our large clients, our large mid-sized businesses that were predominantly in retail, change their money into dollar, first of all, because there's a fear in the market about a potential volatility within the exchange rate environment. We saw a lot of our dollar deposits go up. They went up a quite material percentage. So we had a lot of trading activity happen, and that caused the rates to go up a bit. So we all expected the rates were going to cross the 4,000 mark. They never quite did. So I think we touched 3,900 and then came back down.
For the lawyers moving forward, we need to be in the client's business, understand the client's business, where the client wants to spend money, where they're not really willing to spend money. Don't give a fee note of 100 million when the client is not trigger hungry when spending money. You have to understand their business. Now, if you get into understanding their business, the evolution comes into the lawyer being a part of the business, not the lawyer being there to solve a problem when the problem comes.
To be able to build trust with consumers, especially through an online retail experience, almost always starts with the value of the brand itself. Is it a brand that people recognize, and what do they know that brand for? In healthcare, if you're going to build a healthcare brand, you have to be recognized for safety, quality, for your outcomes. There are certain things that are inherent to why you would go to one healthcare provider and not another.
If you have your goods and services online, how about you create a strong online presence as well on social media or on search engines?
Cities like Kampala, Jinja, Mbarara, and Gulu are and will be the first places to transition into online trading. This is because of the borders that are used to create a delivery structure from retailers to customers.
And so the customer experience is going to be like, can you deliver very quickly? And I think like that's where we have an edge over like all the other players. Is we come with like a big base of like safe border drivers who are trained, and they know like they have to move these items from this location to this other location. We have a smart dispatch system that kind of cuts down on the time, whereby they dispatch the order to someone who is next to the market, so they just have to go to the market, pick it, and then it's also close to me. They show me the vendors that are close to me, and so it means like the time it takes to move that item from that vendor to my house is going to be cut.
The Bank of Uganda came out at the beginning of the pandemic and made changes and allowed us to do multiple restructures. You can only do 3 restructures of loans legally, right, before the pandemic. So they eased that condition. If we're to speak to purely retail, we restructured, I think, almost all the businesses. The first phase of restructure, and that was a 3 months capital and interest moratorium, means 0 repayments to the bank for a 3 months period.
But what I would like to see is more logistics-oriented companies just helping retailers and wholesalers to be able to move product from one end to the other.
Creating a trust between your product and your customers is really hard. And for customers who are buying physically, going to these stores, for them to shift and start buying from their phones, they're going to want to see how it feels or looks on someone else. If it's a dress, they're going to want to test it through like eyes of people like influencers who can very easily in their homes buy these items and start live streaming themselves.
I think traditional retail will stay because of how the economy is structured at the moment. I mean, 83% of your population is in rural areas.
Sometimes it doesn't take you to have a lot of money to keep a business afloat. It just needs you to have a humanity and understand. And the lawyer should not come in and say, okay, money is stopped. This is what the employment law says, restructure like this. No. What does the client want? This is what I want as a client. How do I use the law to get you what you want? And once I do that, then I become probably an outstanding person in your business.
With the emergence of wallets, with the 2 MNOs pushing Airtel Pay and Momo Pay very, very fast, with the emergence of FlexiPay from Stanbic Bank, we will see major disruptions happening in the payment space of our major retail outlets.
The direction that retail is going to take in Africa is going to highly depend on how we are able to collaborate and how we manage logistics across Africa.
The future of retail is online. You can be home, get your stock and advertise it, and someone will buy it.
5-10 years from now, retail will still be with us. We'll just have to evolve in the way we do the business.
There's going to be out of engineering around like trust creation.
We have to take the mantle and the responsibility to ensure that we're moving the country forward.
So the retailer needs to adapt and change the way they're doing things, or else they will lose out. The new customer is online.